This is for CSA survivors who struggle with blaming themselves, so this is going to be a heavy one. I'm reading from the book, The Courage to Heal. Understanding that it wasn't your fault. This starts with a quote. I know I was only 5 years old, but I was an extremely intelligent 5-year-old. I should have been able to figure out a way to escape. Victims often believe that they are to blame for being sexually abused. Many adult survivors continue to hold this belief. Although large numbers of children and adolescents are abused, it is never the fault of any of them. Yet, there are many reasons why survivors assume that blame. Some survivors are told explicitly that it was their fault. The abuser may have said, "You're a bad, nasty, dirty girl, and that's why I'm doing this." Or, "You really want this to happen. I know that you do." Or, "You're such a sexy little girl. I just can't help myself." Some are punished when someone found out. If you said anything, you may have been told you had made up horrible lies, or the subject may have never been discussed, giving you the message that it was too terrible to talk about. Your religion may have told you that you were a sinner, unclean, or damned to hell. You may have become convinced that you are unlovable, even to God. One woman said, "That little girl inside of me is still waiting for lightning to strike because I told people what happened to me. If I say, I think that it was my dad, I think I'll burn up in hellfire." I'm jumping a bit. There are less obvious reasons why survivors blame themselves. It is a stark and terrifying realization for a child to see how vulnerable and powerless she actually is. Thinking that you were bad, that you had some influence on how you were treated, gave you a sense of control. Perceiving yourself as bad allowed for the future possibility that you could become good and that things would then improve. In truth, nothing you did caused the abuse, and nothing within your power could have stopped it. Your world was an unsafe place where adults were untrustworthy and out of control, where your well-being and sometimes your very life was in danger. This perspective, though realistic, is more distressing for many children than thinking that they were bad and somehow responsible for the abuse. For if there is no hope that the people whose job to love you and protect you would do so, where could you turn? Recognizing that you are not to blame means accepting the fact that the people you love did not have your best interest at heart. In one workshop, a woman blamed herself because at the age of 12 she said no and then her father stopped. "Why couldn't I have done that right away, at 4, when it first started?" she chastised herself. "I did have the power to stop him." Another woman answered her, "I said no, and my father never stopped. I fought and kicked and screamed. Abusers don't stop because you say no. They stop when they're ready to stop. By the time you were 12, your father was ready to stop. He probably only liked small children. You had a lot less control than you think you did." Women blame themselves because they took money, gifts, or special privileges. But if you were able to get some small thing back, you should instead give yourself credit. One woman in a workshop was given a bicycle by her abuser. On it, she was able to ride away from her house, out of the woods, and feel the safety of the trees. She blamed herself for having taken the bicycle. Instead, she should be commended for taking what she could get in that wasteland. But I wanted to be close. Many survivors hold particular shameful feelings if they needed attention and affection and did not fight off sexual advances because of those needs, or if they sought out that affection. The closeness may have felt good to you. You may have adored your abuser. You may have loved feeling like Grandpa's special little girl. Women say, "I'm the one who asked for the back rub," or "I kept going back," or "I climbed into bed with him." But you were not wrong. Every child needs attention. Every child needs affection. If these are not offered in healthy, non-sexual ways, children will take whatever ways they can because they are essential needs. But it felt good. Although some women felt only pain or numbness when they were abused, others experienced sensual or even sexual pleasure, arousal, and orgasm. Even though your experience of abuse may have been confusing, frightening, or devastating, you may also have felt some degree of pleasurable feelings. For many, this aspect of the abuse is one of the most difficult. Another woman was gang raped as a teenager, and during she had an orgasm. For a long time, I thought it was a cruel joke that God had made my body that way. I forgot what had happened because of the shame of having liked it. When she first remembered the grape, this woman spent a night frantically skimming Voices in the Night cover to cover to see if anyone else had had an orgasm while being abused. She urgently needed to know that she wasn't the only one. It is important to recognize that it is natural to have had sexual feelings, and that even if you had sexual responses to the abuse and those responses felt good, it still doesn't mean that you are responsible in any way. Our bodies are created to respond to stimulation. When we are touched sexually, our whole physiology is designed to give us pleasure. These are natural bodily responses over which we do not always have control. When we eat a sandwich, our stomachs digest the sandwich. We can't stop our stomachs from digesting the sandwich. In a similar way, when we're stimulated sexually, we can't always stop our bodies from responding. The girl or the woman who is sexually abused and experiences orgasm does not want to be abused. This book genders everything. This is not exclusive to women. Like, that's just always true, but particularly felt important to inject there. The fact that she responds sexually is not a statement that sexual pleasure is bad. And very important, it is not a betrayal of her body. Her body did what bodies are supposed to do. You were betrayed not by your body, but by the adults who trusted you. For Sapphire, it's taken a lot of self-love to overcome the shame. She says, I had to realize I didn't get off because I liked it, but because I have a woman's body that is made to experience passion. My body responded to touch. That was all. And they had no right to mess with that. The anger helped me get over the shame. It doesn't really explain this as well as I wish it did. I have a video on sexual non-concordance and why bodies respond to abuse that I think does a better job, if I can say so myself. But your body responding and you experiencing pleasure can be separate things. It's also okay if your perception was that it had pleasurable aspects, but sometimes it emotionally feels terrible and your body still responds, and that's not, I wouldn't at least say that is necessarily having pleasure. It's arousal. Arousal and pleasure aren't always the same thing. But I was older. When children are abused, their capacity to say no and set limits is severely damaged. So even if the abuse continued into your adult years, you are still not to blame. There is no magic age when you suddenly become a responsible, cooperative partner in sexual abuse. Even if your father is still having sex with you when you are 30, it is not your fault. You may be an adult in age, but you are still responding from the perspective of a small, powerless child. Mary spent her childhood being regularly abused by her stepfather and brothers. When she was 21, she went on a weekend trip with her 22-year-old brother and some of his friends. The two were asked to share a room. I spent the night sleeping on the bathroom floor because my brother would not leave me alone. He begged me to make love with me. He kept grabbing at me. Finally, I locked myself in the bathroom. For a long time, Mary felt guilty about what had happened. He was her brother. He was only a year older than she was. She was an adult and should have known better. She should have never agreed to go on the trip in the first place. It was all her fault, she thought. It wasn't until Mary went to therapy that she began to accept the real facts of the matter. What happened when I was 21 was exactly the same thing as being 8 years old and having to take a bath with my father. I just had never been trained to say no. If your boundaries have always been violated, then it is unfair to expect yourself to be able to set them all of a sudden. You don't become assertive and powerful just because you grow up and leave home. No matter what age you are, no matter what relationship you have with the abuser, if someone with more power is pressuring you into a sexual relationship, then you are being abused. It's never your fault. It is unfair to expect children to be able to protect themselves. Children do a lot of testing. They test limits, they test attitudes. This is their job. They develop a sense of what the world is all about through this testing, and it is always the responsibility of the adult to behave with respect towards children. Even if a 16-year-old girl walks into her living room naked and throws herself onto her father, he is still not justified in touching her sexually. A responsible father would say, there seems to be a problem here. He would tell her to put her clothes on, he'd discuss it with her, and get her professional help if necessary. Regardless of age or circumstance, there is never an excuse for sexual abuse. It is absolutely the responsibility of the adult not to be sexual with children. As a child, you did not have the skills or power to protect yourself. Today, at least, there are child assault prevention programs in schools which teach children to be safe, strong, and free. Now, many parents are teaching their children that they have a right to say no, but it is only recently that children have been provided with even these few basic tools. No woman we know was ever told as a child that she had a right to control her body. Even those of you who did try to resist or fight back often encountered increased coercion. Overcoming shame. A key sign of healing is that your shame becomes less. Instead of looking at somebody's watch while you tell them what happened, you can look at their face. And then eventually you can look in their eyes and tell them without feeling they can see what a creep you are. You can just look at someone, tell them, and say, "And I'm okay," without having to ask, right? I am okay, aren't I? There are many ways to overcome shame. The most powerful is simply talking about your abuse. Shame exists in an environment of secrecy. When you begin to freely speak the truth about your life, your sense of shame will diminish.